Aaron Savali gets his wish. Jacob Misiorowski debuts. A couple of dramatic finishes to some series against division rivals. This is the Brewer Fanatic Podcast, episode 57. We're halfway to 100. Do we get to sell? We didn't celebrate a milestone at 50, but maybe we can do one at 100. But we'll stick on episode 57 for now because we have a lot of action to go through. We have our customary "How are we doing?" question from Jackson Churio's number one fan. Must be a fan of the podcast too if he's asking us how we're doing. We have such kind people who listen to the show. I'll let you go first though, Spencer. How are you?
I've been good. Not as busy the last week or so, which is not the worst thing, not the best thing. You know, I enjoyed all the time I spent with all the people I don't normally get to see, but I was also very tired for the next week after everything I had going on. So I had a pretty relaxed week for the most part. And yeah, this weekend I got a few things some errands and some things I have to get done over the weekend, but nothing too crazy. So another relatively relaxing weekend for me. But Jack, how are you doing?
Miffed. Do you want to know why I'm miffed?
I would love to know why. Yes.
So I cover baseball for my job, but as you know, you've seen me try to do baseball related activities. I'm not super athletic, so I don't get to play baseball.
Oh, yeah.
But I still like to be out and running around and doing something physically related to the game. So I play slow pitch softball every Wednesday night. It has rained in southeastern Wisconsin for 5 of the last 6 Wednesdays. And most of the time just on like Tuesday night into Wednesday or during the day on Wednesday. And then the rest of the week is completely dry. So we have been rained out, I believe, 4 times. We've played 3 games this year for slow pitch. We've been rained out 4 times. And I had to miss one of those games because I went to Cleveland for one of them to cover that series. So I've played in 2 slow pitch softball games. We're supposed to be approaching like the midway point of our schedule, and we have played 3 games, 2 of which that I've been able to participate in. This is one of the very few things that I look forward to during the middle of every week, and I just can't get out there because it's raining 1 day a week, every single week. I need, like, if there's anybody listening who has a passion for weather or knows somebody who has a passion for weather, I need somebody to get to the bottom of this for me. When was the last time in this area that going into this time of year, like May and June, that it has rained this many weeks in a row, but only on Tuesday nights or on Wednesdays, and then the rest of the week has been dry? I need to shut up now because this is going to go too long, but I think you can pick up on my frustration. I just want to play softball. But Mother Nature is not cooperating, and it's doing it in like the most cruel way possible. Again, we're recording this on Thursday now. We got rained out last night, and it was like super nice for most of the day in my area of Wisconsin for just about the entire day. It would have been a perfect night to play softball. Tuesday would have been an okay day to play softball, but it rains on Wednesday and Wednesday only. And I checked the forecast. There's a 50% chance of storms next Wednesday and a 40% chance of showers the Wednesday after that.
Well, I apologize to you on behalf of the weather because I feel terrible for it. No, that does suck. I mean, I had that happen similarly the one year I played slow pitch softball, which, by the way, went horribly. It's not my thing. I need to play real baseball if I'm playing anything that way. It was unlimited arc. It was a mess. I couldn't hit at all. But then I could go and play in the summer league and hit 400, and it was not a problem. So I was like, okay, I'm not terrible at baseball. This is just a different sport. It's a different sport. I wasn't prepared for it to be a different sport. So I am not a slow pitch softball guy, but I know you are. So I feel bad that you haven't been able to get these in.
Oh, it's a whole different game, man. Like, it took me probably 2 years, at least 2 years. So this is like my 5th year playing. And it took me like at least 2 years to finally get out of like the baseball swing path because either I was over the top of everything or I was under everything. Like, it's just the arc of the ball that you have to follow. It's so different. So different. So yeah, entirely different game. But I'm mad. Aaron Savali was mad too because he was bumped out of the Brewers starting rotation, but now he's not in the starting rotation anymore, or on the Brewers, I should say. He did request a trade after the Brewers called up Jacob Misiorowski, which, as a veteran guy, due for free agency, who hadn't necessarily pitched his way out of the rotation, that was his prerogative, and he did end up getting his wish. The Brewers trading him the day after Jacob Misiorowski's debut, actually, to the Chicago White Sox in exchange for Andrew Vaughn. Brewers also sent a little bit of cash over to even out the money in this transaction. So obviously we know what this means for Aaron Savali. He gets to go to a team that's going to guarantee him starts. And if he performs well for the White Sox within the next few weeks here, he's almost certainly going to get moved again at the deadline to a true contender who will hopefully, for him, be interested in his services as a starting pitcher for the rest of the year. But even if he doesn't move, if he pitches okay for the rest of this year as a starter, just probably puts him in a slightly better spot for a free agent. I'm not going to say payday because Aaron Savali's not going to get, a giant contract or anything, but maybe this is the difference between, getting a contract in like that 2 to 5 million range or getting one that's closer to like that 10 million range annually on a short-term deal. So we know what the deal is like from his perspective. Now from the Brewers' perspective, bringing in Andrew Vaughn, I'm just going to say this right off the bat, and I think you feel similarly. I think there are only two ways that we see much of Andrew Vaughn at any point in the big leagues this year for the Brewers. Number one is if Rhys Hoskins gets hurt for a prolonged stretch of time, or number two, if the Brewers end up selling and they trade away Rhys Hoskins and then they just kind of want to see what they have in Andrew Vaughn. Otherwise, I think this is more of they needed to get somebody back. And if you're looking at guys who get you something back, make the money somewhat even, and then maybe as kind of that cherry on top, maybe they can figure something out, it's Andrew Vaughn. This is a guy who, like, if you look at his expected numbers, they're a lot better than the actual numbers. He's been really, really bad this year. Former first rounder as well, but he's also never really been good. Even at his best, he was, I don't have the numbers up in front of me, but I think his career high in WRC plus is like 115 or something with bad defense at first base. He used to play a little bit of corner outfield. This is probably a guy too where I'm just saying this off the top of my head. I don't think the White Sox did a great job with his development. It was kind of messed up from the get-go because you had the COVID year where there were no minor league games, but the White Sox got him to the big leagues pretty quickly, played him out of position right away when he was in the big leagues. Not only did they put him in like the corner outfield spots his rookie year, he also played multiple games at third base and at second base. And if you've seen any pictures or video of Andrew Vaughn, this guy is basically built like a 6 foot tall brick shed, basically. It's not really a guy who you want standing at second base or even really asking to play third if he's never done it before, in professionally at least. So, maybe there's something here, but if I had to guess, he probably just spends the rest of the season in AAA, gets non-tendered, and then latches on somewhere else. So the Brewers do have control of him through next season, but that price tag in ARB is going to be way higher than they want it to be. So I would be shocked if he's around next year as well. More than anything, I think this is just kind of the best that you could get for Savali right now. There may have also been an aspect to this, I don't know for sure, but there may have been an aspect to this of just let's put the matter behind us instead of running the risk of some tensions bubbling with Savali still being here, or just things not making for a great environment for specifically him and the Brewers and potentially the rest of the team. I don't know. But this is what they were able to end up with for a deal that they got done very quickly after he made the request. This is what you have in Andrew Vaughn. Again, I don't think there's going to be a lot to really end up noting here. But I'll give you the floor if you have any different thoughts or any more info on him that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't think this is going to end up being anything. I don't really think there's a ton here. I think if they can fix some of the swing decisions, that's where maybe you see a little bit of the offense in the bat that was supposed to be there unlocked. He takes a lot of strikes and he swings at a lot of balls, and you can't really get much worse than that when it comes to swing decisions. If you are taking pitches in the zone and swinging at them out of the zone, that's a problem. When he does hit the ball, he hits it decently hard. He hits it at decent launch angles, and you can see how there has been power there at times throughout his career. But I think the main thing, the only way I see this happening, anything long term, is if I agree he gets non-tendered this offseason. I'd be curious if I wonder if they end up feeling like, oh, there's a good match here, a good fit here. Maybe they bring him back on a Jake Bauers type of minor league deal next year. I also wonder if they might, if they like what they've seen in AAA by the end of the year. And well, actually, I should take this one other direction. I believe, and I saw this, and I have not confirmed it anywhere, but I saw this on social media in a couple places. I believe if he doesn't come up at any point this year, the Brewers would retain 2 years of control on him. Now, again, unlikely to matter, but I think the only way it does is if they're able to come to terms with him on a deal that's for a decent amount less than what he would be projected to get in arbitration to keep him around, and then they would have another year after that. And I could see them doing that in the right circumstances, because for him, it would probably be his only chance at any guaranteed money on a deal. So he might jump at even just $1 million, for example, because he's pretty unlikely to get anything other than a minor league deal on the open market. And then in that case, the Brewers would have him for an extra year after that, I believe, which then I can see how there might be some value for the Brewers. When you look at him, even just like him playing some left field, everything about him, there is like the poor man's, and poor man's might be generous, but the poor man's Rhys Hoskins type of profile, except for the swing decisions. So you need the swing decisions to improve. I think that's the main thing, that if you see that improve, I could see a scenario where they work something out where it does make sense for both parties for him to be back on a cheaper deal, potentially have an extra year of control afterwards. I think that's the only way I really see this becoming anything of substance. And I guess, like you said, if Rhys Hoskins gets hurt, or if the Brewers end up selling at the deadline, that could change the timeline and change everything else about it. But assuming that doesn't happen, I think that's kind of the one way I could see it working out, where it does make some sense for the Brewers and Vaughn to take it that direction.
So I just pulled up roster resource. He entered 2025 at exactly 4 years of service time, because again, he made the opening day roster in 21, spent 4 seasons in the big leagues through 2024, was never optioned. So he's got, the full set of options. Started the year at 4 years of service time. 6 is the number of years of service time you need to finish a year at to be eligible for free agency. And he's played in 48 games for the White Sox this year. And I believe, I'm trying to look up the definition, to get to a full year of service time, I believe it's 170 something days that you need to spend either on the active roster or on the injured list.
Yeah.
And if he spends the rest of the year in the minor leagues, he's obviously not going to hit that full year of service time. He's not going to come especially close. So yeah, you're right. They would get that extra year then if he stays down. So maybe that's part of the calculus as well. And I do think it's possible he comes back on another kind of deal. I'm just wondering if from his vantage point, if the choices are you come back on a minor league deal with the Brewers or nothing is guaranteed, versus maybe a rebuilding team is more willing to sign you for guaranteed money, and you get that opportunity there. Maybe that's just what he prefers. I don't know. But yeah, like the expected numbers, like he's got a 321 expected weighted on base versus a 233 in the big leagues so far this year. So some of the under the hood numbers saying that he's close to average, or he's swung the bat like close to average. But I agree, it's the swing decisions that are the big thing for me right now. Are the Brewers able to fix that? Who knows? That is something that they try to really emphasize with a lot of their hitters. So we'll see what he gets up to in AAA. But Pat Murphy said right off the bat, like, we're not even really at a point right now where we can have the conversation about where does he fit, because he's got to hit first. And if he hits, then you have that conversation down the line. But, even then, not really a spot for him with Hoskins and Bauers among the team's best bats this year at first base so far. Moving on, we'll get into some of the big league action on the field Brewers taking on the Cardinals at home to conclude their 10-game homestand. Game 1, Jacob Misiorowski making his MLB debut. The Brewers would win 6-0 behind him. Misiorowski, 5 hitless innings against the Cardinals. He did walk 4, struck out 5. A little bit of a technicality, on that fourth walk. He fell behind 3-0. And the Brewers said post-game he was already cramping a little bit going into that inning. And so he's cramping. He's getting the ball back from Contreras after that 2-0 pitch to fall behind 3-0. Steps awkwardly on the base of the mound with his right leg and rolls his ankle. And that ended up being it for his debut. Nick Mears came in and would get back into the count to make it full, but he finished the walk, so the walk was charged to Misiorowski. But we knew walks are always going to kind of be the thing here. I think for the most part, though, you never really saw things snowball on him. There were a couple moments where he started to spray it a little bit and was able to kind of rein it back in time before things really got out of hand, which was good to see. But the highlight here, obviously, is always going to be the stuff. This may be the best fastball for a starting pitcher in baseball, if not the best fastball in baseball, just in terms of how unique it is, all the qualities that you mix together to make it tough to hit. It's the extension on it, the velocity. So if from his extension, he gains about 2 miles an hour of perceived velocity. So when he's throwing 98, it's basically the same amount of reaction time as if he's throwing 100. If he's throwing 100, it's the same amount of reaction time as if he's throwing 102. And when he hits 102, it's about the same reaction time as if he was throwing 104. So you already have that going for you. There's the fact that he gets more backspin carry on that pitch than you would expect from a guy who's got such a low arm slot. And then he gets a little bit of run on it too. Just all these things combined make it absolutely ridiculous when he throws it at the top of the strike zone, which he did in his debut. The secondaries, the curveball is probably the best one just because he gets more depth on it than you would expect for a pitch that's thrown almost 90 miles an hour. In fact, there was a tweet too, I can't remember who sent it out, that said that actually it is the most induced vertical break, the most depth for a curveball thrown anywhere near that velocity in baseball. So yeah, it's a unicorn pitch. So that's 2 unicorn pitches. And then you have, let's be honest, he can call it whatever he wants, but it's a cutter.
Yeah.
But a 96 mile an hour cutter is still pretty good too. Maybe not as exciting sounding as a 96 mile an hour slider, but I mean, really the story here was just the outlier stuff. And the way he used it too, like I was actually very surprised that they went with that cutter slider as much as they did. I think we were on here before he debuted, both saying we thought he was going to throw a lot of fastballs just because that's what he does. That's what the Brewers do. It's a good pitch. Let's let it eat. But William Contreras mixing that secondary pitch in a lot more than I thought we were going to see. It was actually, I believe, it was only the second time this year that he threw like 30% cutters in a start. And it was in his big league debut. So all in all, really impressive stuff. Spencer, you have spent a lot more time watching this stuff already, so I'm sure nothing really surprising to you, but what were your takeaways from watching him get his first opportunity in the big leagues?
Yeah, like you said, the stuff didn't surprise me. It was very fun to watch it play against major league hitters, of course, but you touched on it. I think just his ability to rein it back in when things weren't necessarily going well for a pitch or two. He had the 4 walks. Obviously, one was finished by Mears, but decent chance he was going to end up with a walk there. 3-0 for a guy like Misiorowski is going to be somewhat tough to climb back from. Either way, one of the walks, very competitive all around the zone, even a couple that I think clipped the zone and were called balls, which I will say he's probably going to have stuff like that happen, especially as William gets used to catching him. Like that type of stuff is going to be hard to receive perfectly, especially because while Miz has been in the zone a lot more, it's not like he's throwing to the glove perfectly. He's just throwing it in the zone more often, which means William's going to be reaching, and it's not going to necessarily be the easiest pitch to receive. So there will probably be some missed calls with Miz on the mound. I think that's just something we have to expect and not be too surprised by. But he really had one walk. I think it was a 4-pitch, maybe it was a 5-pitch walk where things just really got away from him. I was impressed. Even when he first got into the stretch, you could tell he usually slide steps um, when he's in the stretch. And you could tell that was speeding him up a little bit. His arm wasn't catching up. He was missing up and in. And then he just quickly adjusted and got in the zone and ended up getting a double play ball to erase the first base runner that he had. There was just a lot of good things to see. And more than anything, I knew he was a relatively calm guy just hearing him talk to the media and do all of that stuff. But like, you could just tell he was in control of his emotions and everything out there. And that's not easy to do in a debut. The same thing was true of Logan Henderson earlier this year. Like, it's nice to see that out of your starters when there's no reaction to negative things. There's no huge reactions to positive things outside of the last out of an inning where you can kind of let it loose a little bit. Like, they just seem to be in a really good place mentally. And that's going to be one of the biggest things for him. I mean, there's zero doubt his stuff is going to play. And I did on the last episode kind of wonder how they were going to use the slider cutter, because it has been the pitch that he throws strikes with the most often in the minors. Like, when he needs to be in the zone, it's the pitch that he's been best at landing in the zone. And they went to it a lot, and it looked even better from the actual nice camera angle that you get in Milwaukee compared to what you're looking at on, on TV from minor league baseball cameras. Like, those are normally pretty offset to the right, and it's just kind of hard to see some movement stuff. And yeah, I mean, it looked like a really good pitch, and the movement profile is very much a cutter, but he does throw it pretty much like a slider. When you see his release and the way he's throwing it, he's trying to throw a slider, which is why he calls it that. But the movement and the obviously throwing it 95, 96, I mean, that's everything about it looks like a cutter except for the way he throws it. And I think you could even make the argument that might be in part because the ball doesn't have time to move much when you're throwing at 96 and it's going in the zone. But either way, and we didn't even mention, he threw 2 changeups and one of them got a pretty bad swing for a strikeout. Like, he even got to show that off in his first start. So there's just so much to like here. I guarantee you, I shouldn't guarantee, but I'm pretty confident that at one point there's going to be a really bad start from Miz where he loses it. He probably has some bad command. I don't expect him to get touched up a ton. He will at some point. Somebody's going to start connecting on fastballs. That's just how it happens at the big league level. But there will be a couple bad starts in here at some point. I'm confident in that, and it's unfortunate, but it's just the truth. That said, he already showed what he's capable of when things are going even solidly well. Like, I wouldn't even say that was the best version of Jacob Misiorowski that I've seen this year. Like, I've seen a better version in AAA games than what we got in his debut. It's going to play, and I think you could pretty early on, pretty quickly see, like, yes, this move may have upset Savali. Yes, Logan Henderson's been up and doing really well, but this is the highest ceiling pitcher on your staff now, and he's the type of guy who can be a legitimate weapon in the starting rotation. And the other guys just don't have that type of ceiling or even all that close. I like Logan Henderson a lot, but he's probably a middle of the rotation guy if everything goes well. Like, Miz has the type of stuff that can legitimately carry a pitching staff and can be considered as one of the better pitchers in baseball if things are going well for him with command and everything else. So, yeah, I think he rewarded the Brewers. It was very nice to see him out there. I will say, once I found out he was cramping, as somebody who had numerous leg cramping, calf cramping issues throughout my athletic career, it became pretty obvious when I went back and watched the replay that was very much the case. The way he was trying to push on his leg, I've been there before, like trying to get the cramp to go away. And I can totally understand how he ended up rolling his ankle on it, because it's an uncomfortable place to be. But it did look pretty funny in the moment, knowing that he was okay in the end. It looked very clumsy. It looked uncomfortable, but I get what it was happening, because those cramps can just be super annoying. And we should note, like, he mentioned after the game, he got 0 sleep the night before, which absolutely contributes to stuff like cramping. And then he also sat for a pretty long half inning before that happened, because the Brewers actually had a very nice offensive inning. So it makes sense how this happened to him. I don't really think he's ever had a cramp in the minors that I can remember, so I don't think this will be an issue. But I guess something to maybe keep an eye on, because people who get cramps often do tend to continue to get cramps. So maybe the only thing I would take from the start that I may have a slight concern on moving forward.
Let's talk about that 5-run fifth really quickly. That was where a lot of the run support came from. Joey Ortiz hitting an RBI double in that inning. Sal Frelick with a 2 RBI single. And Jackson Churio with a 2-run home run to cap the scoring. Aaron Ashby, meanwhile, followed Nick Mears out of the bullpen, got a 3-inning save. This is what we've been waiting to see for a while. Like, Pat Murphy uses him for some length here just to save the rest of the pen, and it definitely worked out nicely to put a bow on a very special night at American Family Field. Game 2, the Brewers would take this one.
Hold on.
Yes.
Wait a second. We got to talk about the fact that Crowder Community College got 8 of the 9 innings done for the Brewers in this game. That's awesome. What are the chances of a community college having 2 pitchers on the same staff like that who go out and just shove? Like, that's got to feel incredible for that coaching staff, the people who coached them at that school. And I know they had a bunch of people watching for Miz, and then the fact that they got to back it up with an Aaron Ashby 3-inning save. Like, that's a really cool moment that got some attention, but I kind of felt like almost not enough, because that is, I mean, this is not like LSU. This is not like Clemson. Like, these aren't huge baseball programs that happen to have teammates or something. Like, these are a few years separated, a community college that had 2 guys go out, both showing near triple digit velocity on the mound. And yeah, I thought that was a really cool part of the story from that game too.
Well, now they just got some love from Spencer Michaelis on the Brewer Fanatic podcast. So now they can know that they've really made a difference.
Yes.
And they can rest on their laurels.
Yes.
If I may, game 2.
I'll allow it.
Okay. Game 2, the Brewers winning this one by a final of 3-2. William Contreras contributing 2 of the 3 runs. He hit a double in the 4th and then a go-ahead sac fly in the 6th. Real story of this game was Freddie Peralta, after not doing so hot when he was allowed to be pushed into the 6th inning and try to finish that 6th inning in Cincinnati. Similar scenario coming up here. For some context, you have runners on the corners. Game is tied 1-1 in the 6th. Nolan Arenado's coming up. Pat Murphy has Grant Anderson ready in the bullpen as the righty to come in and face Arenado. Goes out to the mound. Seemed like he was going out there to go to Grant Anderson. Peralta said that that's what he was expecting. Murphy made it sound like, not for sure like that's what he was going to do, but he was prepared to go to Grant Anderson there. But he asked Freddie, do you want to stay in? Peralta lobbied to stay in. Gets Arenado to pop up to first in foul territory on the very first pitch, completing 6 innings of 1-run ball, 4 hits allowed for him, only 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. And then Trevor McGill giving up a run in the 9th, but hanging on for the save. Trevor McGill had an interesting week. We'll talk about the finish to this series as well. Both series that we're recapping this week, dramatic finishes in the final game for both of them. But do you have any comment on Peralta's outing and how things finished for him?
No, I mean, it was, I don't know that it worked, but I don't love the trend of letting Freddie talk him. Pitchers are not going to say that they want to come out. Like, it's just, they're not going to. Now, I think there's a benefit to doing that once in a while where it gives them a little extra juice. Like, they feel like they're going to prove everyone like they're making the right decision here. By sending Murph back to the dugout, like Freddie even has a little bit extra in the tank and he rears back and he finds a couple extra miles per hour or whatever. Like, I can see how you use it as like a motivating thing once in a while, but I also don't necessarily want Freddie to have too much power in terms of how long he stays in the game, because it a lot of times does not work out super well the later he goes into a game. But either way, I mean, he did the job. He stepped up and got it done. So no real complaints there. Just it was a really nice start from him. It was nice to see 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. The strikeouts hadn't really been there recently. And especially if they had been there, it hadn't been in games where he was also getting good results and limiting walks and stuff. So this was one of his more just all around solid starts for the last, we've talked about it. it's been a little while where there's been some ups and downs for him, and this was a really solid start. So just in general, in a game against a divisional opponent that honestly has a bunch of guys who have seen Freddie a lot too, that always matters. Like, it was nice to see him go out and just really get the job done.
Would you be surprised if I told you opponents have a 594 OPS against Freddie the third time through this year?
No, not necessarily this year. That wouldn't shock me because he has been pretty good. But the thing is, like, I would think most of the time that he's gone 3 times through have been his best starts in general. So he's probably having a good day. I'd be curious on the career numbers, but I guess thinking back, like, it makes sense. You think even to like the first start of the season, he gave up a couple early runs and then he found the changeup and started going. I suppose thinking about it, like, they've done a pretty good job of changing the way he's pitching throughout games this year, where he's not giving the same look 3 times, I guess. If so, that might be one of the things he's improved on. So yeah, that's fair, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that was what I asked him about post game in this one because the way that he pitched the Cardinals first time through the first couple innings and the rest of the game was completely different. Trying to get the numbers in front of me, but it was a ton of fastballs the first time through for him, and then the rest of the way, a lot more reliance on all of the other secondaries. And he did say that that was kind of a goal. Like, we wanted to make sure we switched it up as we were moving along. This is a team that I've faced plenty of times. They're very familiar with me. So the first time through the lineup in this start, 68% fastballs. The rest of the outing, 47% fastballs. So pretty dramatic change as the game's going on. So I do think that's something that, like you said, definitely contributes to it. Just switching things up the longer he went along. It probably isn't talked quite enough about how far he's come in terms of where the entire arsenal is. Like, we talk about the consistency all the time and maybe just not always having enough of the kind of outings the Brewers need from him sometimes in his position. But like, this is a guy when he first came up, it was like only the fastball and kind of a fringy curveball. And that was really all he had. And now he's obviously still got the fastball, but he's got curveball, slider, changeup. He's gotten better at mixing some of those, and also I think identifying which ones he's got the feel for on a given day and how to use them. So something that I don't think gets pointed out enough, but kind of cool to see in this start. Game 3, though, is the one where a lot of the drama starts coming in here. This is where things get kicked up a notch. And I know you have some thoughts on this one, so I'll give you the floor for a little bit to talk about some of it. But Wilson Contreras is right in the middle of this. Everything starts with Caleb Durbin's first at bat. Durbin grounds out to third, 5-3. Wilson Contreras, if you watch this game, you would have been reminded of this, but Cardinals have moved him to first base full time this year. He never really had a lot of experience over there, but generally speaking, the footwork around the bag doesn't take that long to learn. It is, yes, you need to learn some things, but if you're going into the year prepared for this kind of transition, I don't think this is something where you're going to be in June and you're still struggling with how do you navigate the base, especially because really everything started after the out was already recorded. So usually first baseman catches the ball, out's recorded. Usually he's going to kind of spring forward off the base and go into his throwing motion, toss the ball around, go around the horn. Wilson Contreras, after the out was recorded, stepped back off the base with his back foot toward the baseline, ends up colliding with Durbin. Everybody's okay. Nobody's hurt. But I'm not going to speak on intentions here. I'll just say it's a very odd move. I've never seen a first baseman come off the base like that. Obviously, it causes the collision as well. Rhys Hoskins was not happy about it, yelling from the dugout at Contreras. When we asked about a post-game, all he would say was we were talking about playing first base, which I'm sure that was part of the conversation. That's not an inaccurate statement from Rhys Hoskins. So tempers are already elevated a little bit. Rhys Hoskins gets hit by the Cardinals in his next at-bat. So then the next time that Wilson Contreras comes into the box, Jose Quintana hits him. Now, the Brewers on their side said all the things that you should say, after this situation, which is nobody got hit on purpose. There's no, tempers or like we're just playing the game. But let's be real here. Like both of these hit by pitches were very obviously intentional, all the way down to starting with kind of the decoy pitch low and away to the righty before you come in and hit him. These were intentional. As far as what happened in the game, nothing really the rest of the way. Umpires didn't make a huge deal out of it. But both of these hit by pitches, and again, like the Brewers said all the right things, but just watching what was going on, we all know that these were on purpose. Yeah. And I know you've got some thoughts about both hit by pitches, including the response hit by pitch.
I do have some thoughts on both of them. I mean, the Cardinals can do whatever they want in terms of hitting Rhys Hoskins. That's their prerogative. That's their team. They can do what they want. I don't agree with it, but they can do what they want. I am so against hitting people in baseball. I just think it is the most antiquated garbage that teams still feel like they need to do to quote unquote protect their own players or whatever. Like, going back to the play at first with Durbin, this started everything, obviously. I honestly don't know what the intent was. I think there's at least a chance that Contreras, who, yes, is used to the footwork, but also I wouldn't say strikes me as the smartest dude in the world, didn't just have like a momentary lapse in like where he was, caught the ball and just kind of like floated backwards after catching it. Like, oh, inning's over, just going to kind of step back. Like, if that happened and that's actually the case, that would not surprise me. It also wouldn't surprise me if he did step back and give a little bit of a hip check to Caleb Durbin. And yes, if he did that, that is absolute trash. It's dirty stuff. I don't understand what the point of it would have been. I don't know how Caleb Durbin or him would have had any beef going into this situation, like what he would have been gaining or what he would have been upset about or what would have led to this, but he still could have done it. All that said, they hit Rhys. Yes, dumb. I guess to that extent, the Brewers probably feel like they're protecting not only Durbin, but also Rhys in that moment. To me, and this is going to sound bad, but like, I actually think hitting people is the coward's way out in all of this. One, you're throwing. It's a baseball can do a lot of damage. You are throwing at somebody who's unprotected, who can't really defend themselves in that moment. Like, I'm sure baseball would not agree with this, but I would, and I probably wouldn't agree with this if this happened on our team that I coach. So maybe I'm talking backwards here, but like, to me, if you're going to handle something, you should kind of handle it right away and just go do something about it. And I don't like the throwing at someone. I don't think that's a real way to take care of something. Like, if you have a legitimate problem, as much as I didn't like Abner Uribe going after Jose Siri last year, like, I'm not for either of these, I should say. But I think when people say like, oh, it's cowardly to not hit your guy or you're not taking care of your guy, like, to me, the real way to respond, if that's what you're worried about, is to just go get him when he's not unprotected, completely out there where he can just get smoked by a baseball. Go get him. That's how you make a point, if you're going to make a point, in my opinion. Now, again, I would do neither of these. And personally, if I were Caleb Durbin, I would not want my team to do either of those things. Hitting Contreras, not only dumb for the reasons I just laid out, it gives the Cardinals a free base runner. And Contreras was 0-2 with 2 strikeouts in this game. Contreras, I believe I saw at that point, was 1-for-24 against Quintana in his career. You gave him a free base in a game that was still competitive. And we have this win tonight thing we talk about every single time on here, that we have this mantra, like, everything we're doing is to try and win tonight. But right there, you're giving away a free base runner in a chance where you could have had 2 outs, nobody on, if you get Wilson Contreras out in that spot. Obviously, you don't know what's to come, but he ends up walking the next guy. He gives up a 3-run homer, and it ends up being a 3-run game at the end of the game. Like, I don't understand what you did to actually protect Caleb Durbin there. If I'm Caleb Durbin, I don't feel like and everybody's like, I'm upset that my team gave away a base runner. And maybe I'm the weird one here. Maybe I I just don't have that type of like mentality on things. I don't like get back. I don't like any of that stuff. I like get back in the form of striking him out. And if Jose Quintana strikes him out and wants to say something to him afterwards, like I'd have no problem with him doing that. But I just do not. I do not agree, and I do not like throwing at people. I don't agree with fighting, but I think when we go into this macho thing where people are always like, it's manly to do these things, like, oh, like, to me, it's not. Hitting someone is not. It's just, that's a moment where they can't do anything to you. You can't, you are the only one who can do anything to them. That's like a cheap shot to me. That's basically what it is. So if we're going to talk about like being manly and being macho and doing the right thing and going after, like, to me, hitting somebody is the opposite of that. That's the cowardly way to handle it. So I disagree with it on pretty much every level. I hate it. I'm kind of shocked that I agree the umpires did a good job. I actually think ejecting Quintana would have escalated things. I think it would have made things worse in the moment. I'm a little surprised there wasn't a suspension handed down, because they do still do that afterwards. They will review it, and not just to Quintana, to the pitcher that hit Hoskins too. I would have imagined both of them would have got it. Maybe they fined them, under the radar, something like that. We didn't find out about it. Fine too, but like, they were clearly intentional, and there's very clearly rules that say you cannot do that. So I don't know. The whole thing was a mess. I do agree the umpires handled it well. And in the moment, I thought both Hoskins and Contreras handled it well during the game. Both of them took their base. I actually thought what Contreras did when he got hit was hilarious and a great way to make a point. If I were a batter, to go pick up the ball and just hand it to Quintana, tap him on the back and run to first. Like, I loved that. Then, and I'll let you get into the nitty gritty of what he said after the game, but like, then that changed after the game when he handled it about as poorly as you could possibly handle it. But I thought in the game, I do agree, outside of hitting people, which I don't agree with, that they handled everything well. Nobody let it escalate to a point where it did become like a full-on brawl, or we were having just dueling hit by pitches the rest of the game with a bunch of ejections. Like, none of that happened. So I thought the umpiring crew did a good job of not letting anything get out of control, but you could tell I get worked up about it. I hate it. And I will, like, my team that I'm coaching, it better never hit somebody on purpose. I can tell you that. Like, that is a thing that I will stand by against anyone. That is not happening. Like, it's just not happening. So I don't like it. I hate when the Brewers are involved in it. It's been rare that the Brewers are involved in it. I believe in the Council era, I think the only time there was like a true one that was obvious, Zach Davies did it once, and I believe he did get a suspension for it. The Freddie one last year was, people had their opinions on it. I'm not 100% sure. Not as obvious as this one for me as the Quintana one, but I don't like it. I really hope the Brewers do not become involved in the business of hitting people when they feel wronged or that somebody did something. Yeah, I don't like it. At least this time, I will say it was a physical thing. I think it's even worse when it's somebody who just like bat flipped and we're hitting people.
Yeah.
I think that is a worse scenario. I should say that. Like, that is a completely different thing. This was at least, okay, they took a cheap shot. Now we're kind of taking a cheap shot. I get that to an extent. I still disagree, though, obviously, on the whole.
Yeah, like, I think this is more of an eye for an eye kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, the doing it because somebody bat flipped you didn't like how they celebrated, or even if you didn't
Yes.
like them jawing at you. Like, I think, like, the Cardinals hitting Hoskins because he jawed at Contreras, that's, I think, in terms of, like, what the motivation is for that, if I had to rank those. But if you went back to the very first episode of the pod, you can probably find me yelling about most of the same things that you just did. And I agree, it's dumb. Like, that's gonna be an unpopular opinion. I have the privilege of getting to be in a major league clubhouse over 80 times a year, and I'm sure everybody in that clubhouse would disagree with me for saying that I think it's dumb, because this is still very much ingrained in the game among players, especially. I think, is like, this is just how you police things. Well, my response to that is there are rules that, like, rules can police things. So that's, I just, I fail to see what the advantages of doing this. And again, like everything you talked about, like, you see what happens when a guy gets hit in the face with a pitch, how scary that is. And I
Yes.
understand these guys are the best in the world at controlling a baseball, but what happens if you aim at somebody and it does get away from you? Then what happens? What happens if you're trying to hit them like in the right spot, if you're trying to hit them in the butt or something and you miss and you get them up in that head area and something really scary happens? To me, it's just not I don't ever really see an appropriate time to do it. And I don't think it was appropriate to do it here. Again, just get the guy out, keep playing baseball. If he keeps doing things that you're concerned about, go to the league. Like, I think there are other ways to handle this than what the Brewers did. I do think it's good that it didn't escalate. This could have been way
Yeah.
worse than it ended up being, like you said. But yeah, I mean, I will say, like, everybody in the stadium knew that this was coming too. And I think like
Oh yeah.
Contreras' reaction too is the reaction of a guy who knew it was coming. Like he knew he was going to get the revenge hit by pitch, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think he also seemed to understand too from the reaction that like Quintana felt like he had to do this.
Yeah.
Not even that he was trying to go after Contreras, but like the rules of the game, the unwritten rules of the game dictated that Quintana had to do this, so he did it. And like that's the read that I got just from the way Contreras reacted to the whole thing, picking up the ball, kind of giving him like the pat on the shoulder and everything. Like you got to remember too, like Quintana caught Contreras, or excuse me, Contreras caught Quintana for
Yeah.
several seasons when they were both with the Cubs. Like they have a rapport with each other. But to me, that almost makes the whole thing even stranger that this is a thing that still happens. Like, I don't know. I don't think this needs to be the way anything is handled. I think it's dumb. I don't I'm skeptical that it actually solves anything the way that the players or people seem to think it does, that makes it necessary still. But I'm not shocked that any of this happened. It's
No.
so deeply ingrained in baseball's culture. It's not going anywhere like anytime soon. So Pat Murphy's quote was interesting from this, where he said nobody got hit on purpose. Um, and then he also said, we're not trying to start any fights, but if something is done to us, we're not just going to stand by and let it happen. So that was an interesting quote. Um, but yeah, you mentioned post game was pretty telling to me too. If you're going to look at the comparison between how the two sides handled this,
Yes.
like I said, I don't think the Brewers needed to go back and hit Contreras as apparent retaliation, but you give them credit. They said all the right things in post game, handled it politely, mostly stayed quiet, not trying to make this any worse than it already was. And then Wilson Contreras decides that he's going to rattle off some words that I'm not going to repeat on this show, almost certainly talking about Rhys Hoskins, because it sounded like he was talking about someone who was yelling at him from the dugout, and then not saying anything when he got on base, which I would argue that's Rhys Hoskins not trying to make the situation worse than it is. He's already said what he felt he needed to say to Contreras. Now he's on base. Let's just play ball instead of making this situation worse. But I don't know if Contreras wanted him to start throwing punches or something at first base or keep yelling at him. I don't know. But kind of telling for me how the two sides handled this in post game. So we'll see what things look like between these two teams moving forward. They had to stay at the same hotel late in the week right after this series because they were both in Chicago. So who knows if anything happened there. I do want to kind of quickly steer the conversation to Quintana. 4 1/3 for him, 8 hits, 7 runs, 5 of them were earned. As you mentioned, kind of the blow up inning was started with hitting Wilson Contreras and giving them that free base, which again is the other aspect of this too. If I get the free base, like I feel like I'm the one who should be getting the last laugh here, not the team that hit me. But
Yep.
I digress. 3 walks, 4 Ks, a home run allowed. Since coming off the injured list, Jose Quintana has a 5.02 ERA, a 4.74 FIP. But really, what stands out here is the 15.7% strikeout rate to a 14.3% walk rate. I'm just going to say he's looked bad since he came off the IL. Like his control
Yeah.
is not good. It probably looks a little worse because he already nibbles to begin with, and then if he's not hitting the nibble locations, which is what's going on right now. Basically, he's trying to go like to righties that down and away sinker, and he's missing off the plate with it. But yeah, he just not in a single start since he came back. He's never looked sharp. Like he's found ways to rebound a little bit in some outings as he's gone along, but there's never been an outing where he's come out looking sharp since he came off the IL.
No, there hasn't. And it's going to get interesting over the next, month and a half or so. They've shown that they're willing to bring a younger guy up and move a veteran either to the bullpen or move him in a trade. I think it's different with Quintana. I think they did want him to be here because of in part, his experience with big games and his experience with starting in a pennant race and all those things. But like, you already have more starters potentially coming back off of injury still. You still have Logan Henderson in AAA. I don't think his leash is like close to being up here, but I don't think it extends past the deadline. I don't think it extends to a point where if he's not performing over the next month or so, that they're not going to be willing to either move him or just move on from him for somebody like Henderson to get starts, or perhaps Woodruff is healthy at that point and getting starts or whatever. Like I don't think he's an untouchable guy in the rotation, and what he's been since he came off the injury is the worst starter in the rotation by a decent amount in that time frame. So yeah, it'll be interesting to follow it, because I don't think this version of him is really the true version of what Quintana is right now, but I also don't think the guy before the injury was really the true version of what Quintana is right now either. So I think somewhere in the middle is where he settles. I guess how close to which version does he settle is kind of what we're looking at.
So to that point, like I said, he's got a 4.74 FIP since he came off the IL, but before he went on the IL, 4.54 FIP. So the actual ERA estimators are not a whole lot different here. This is really, and he had a 2.65 ERA before the IL placement. Really what this is it's a guy who is experiencing a combination of some pretty heavy regression that was already looming, and then you add in the fact that he's not throwing nearly enough strikes, and he's missing and allowing those free base runners. It kind of gets you to where you are now. But yeah, look, this is a guy on a 1-year deal for under $5 million. Technically, the total's a little higher than that because there's going to be the mutual option that gets declined, and that's how they push money onto next year's budget instead of counting toward this year's payroll. But still, this is not a guy you have long-term investments in. So if it doesn't get better over the course, we're still probably talking quite a few weeks yet. But yeah, this is a guy who I don't think they're going to feel a huge obligation to stand by to try to get right if he doesn't get right. Now, maybe just because he's got more of that veteran status, and because you have guys on the roster and the bullpen who have options, maybe he is someone who they give the option of, hey, would you prefer to pitch in relief here if we can't afford to start you anymore? Maybe he's someone who says yes because he's not going for that free agent payday like Savali was. So I could see something like that happening. And the Brewers have done that before too. Like Gio Gonzalez is a good example of someone who was kind of willing to do that back and forth a little bit, just wherever the Brewers needed him. He had been around for a while, already kind of made a lot of his money, knew he wasn't lined up for a big contract coming up or anything like that, or a first run through free agency. So maybe that's the way this goes. We're still talking a ways out yet, but I still think something to note just kind of about his performance so far, his performance since he came back, kind of what the future could look like for him.
Yeah.
So I mentioned dramatic finishes to each of these series. Game 4, a tight one for the Brewers, a 3-2 win. Quinn Priester got the start, another solid one for him. 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, an earned run, 3 strikeouts. The funniest part about this start for me was most of the loud contact he got went for outs, and most of the moderate or soft contact he got went for hits. But that's baseball sometimes. What stood out to me also, used the cutter a little more again. So, I wrote that story on him about how they had really simplified it down to sinker slider. Chris Hook did say we're working on the other pitches. He called out the cutter specifically as one that he thinks can take a step forward, but they were still doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff with it. But since then, it's been broken out now in these last 2 starts, using it up in the zone a lot, especially to lefties. And, we'll see if that's something that continues to play into the game plan. On the offensive side, Christian Yelich hit a solo homer, and then Drew Avans hit a sac fly. In the fourth inning, Drew Avens, who never hits the ball hard or pulls it in the air, in that at-bat, hit the ball hard and pulled it in the air for a sac fly in his second at-bat as a Brewer. So, again, baseball is funny sometimes. Sal Frelick then adding that final insurance run that ended up being pretty decisive with an RBI ground out to the pitcher in the seventh inning as part of an inning where the Brewers basically just got a bunch of infield hits and ground ball singles and scratched one across. The dramatic finish, again, coming courtesy of Trevor McGill, who started his outing with a 12-pitch at-bat against Nolan Arenado. Arenado won the battle, ended up singling. This at-bat, interesting to me for a couple of reasons. Number one, another instance of a guy just not being beaten by Trevor McGill's fastball like they used to be, or at least not as much as they used to be. Also, every pitch he threw in this at bat was like to the same quadrant of the strike zone. And to me, as this at bat went along, you could tell Arenado was just kind of focusing in on that low and away and just kind of sticking the bat out there and spoiling them and then seeing if he could get a mistake. I'm not saying you get him out if you go up here, but I was surprised that pitch never came. Now, whether Trevor McGill was trying to throw every pitch down and out, that's a little more of a debate because he's not exactly a command specialist. But Arenado gets on. Nolan Gorman reaches on a bunt single. And then McGill, with a couple of really impressive sequences that featured a lot of curveballs, goes strikeout, strikeout, strikeout to end it. So a pretty emphatic finish. Trevor McGill and William Contreras both letting out some primal screams after this game came to a conclusion. But a big series for the Brewers against a division rival. This vaulted them up into second place in the division behind the Chicago Cubs, who the Brewers would play next. They went to Wrigley. Game one, the Cubs taking this one by a final of 5-3. Isaac Collins got the scoring started for Milwaukee with a 2-run home run. But Seiya Suzuki off of Chad Patrick in the fifth, hitting a 3-run home run. So this was really the decision of the game. Patrick staying in here. You had Rob Zastryzny in the bullpen getting ready to go, seemingly to face kind of like that Kyle Tucker, Seiya Suzuki, Pete Crow Armstrong pocket. But Chad Patrick was allowed to stay in, and he gives up that go-ahead home run third time through. I would have gone Rob Z for Kyle Tucker here, who doubled off of Patrick before this home run was hit. So what happened is Ian Happ reached on a walk, Tucker doubles, Seiya Suzuki hits the 3-run home run. I'm just wondering, so like the Brewers and just about every single Chad Patrick start, Murphy has always said, well, we were going batter by batter with him in that final inning, that third time through. And, you know, there have been times where like they did it in the Red Sox start, batter by batter. He gives up a double. Okay, you're out. There have also been starts, batter by batter. He gets through it, ends up staying in, gets the job done. That's what happened in one of his starts on the last homestand.
Yep.
This one did not get through it, but like this is a batter by batter where a guy reached it, they kept him in. So Ian Happ draws that walk. And I'm just kind of wondering if like, so yes, he drew the walk. But Chad Patrick looked fairly solid for most of this game. The velo was up a little bit. He was mixing in some of the secondaries a little more. And that walk to Ian Happ, there were a couple of really well-placed pitches that probably should have been called for strikes. So I wonder if from the dugout they're seeing that and saying, I know this guy's reached, but we still think he looks pretty good. Let's ride it out. To me, that doesn't matter a whole lot because I still think third time through, if it's good-looking Chad Patrick against Kyle Tucker or Rob Z against Kyle Tucker, I think I'm still taking Rob Z with the third time through and all this stuff. But I'm just trying to think of kind of what their thought process might have been. I don't think it was a terrible decision, but I personally would have gone the other way. The other factor you got to think about here is like, okay, you're also looking at like this Suzuki matchup. Would you rather have Patrick or Rob Z out there? But again, like to me, I would still rather get the lefty for Tucker over. Like getting that matchup is more important to me than maintaining the righty for Suzuki. And then also getting the lefty for PCA too. But like if you're looking Tucker versus Suzuki, because PCA is not guaranteed to hit in that inning at that point either. if you're narrowing it down to Tucker versus Suzuki, I'd rather have the matchup for Tucker. It's not the way they went. So while ultimately it was the more, in theory, favorable matchup for that Suzuki matchup, it didn't work out, but it's more like the Tucker at bat that I'm coming back to. I think I can see what they were going for, but I would have gone Rob Z. How about you?
Yeah, I would have too. And I think this is one where I get it and I agree with you. I think the fact that, I mean, a couple of those pitches to Hap burned off the outside corner and were called balls, and they were good spots, and the stuff did look good. Like you said, we saw some 96s out of him, which we really haven't seen. I guess my question then becomes, why was Rob Z really even hot at that point? Like, if Ian Happ gets a single there, do you go to him instead of a walk? Like, if you were going to have him ready for Tucker, it changes. If Happ gets out and you have 2 outs and you want to say, hey, we've got 2 outs, nobody on, let's go, or let's let him face Tucker here and see if he can finish the inning. Like, that's never going to kill you in that moment. Like, I get that. But once the walk happens, it feels like you said, if you're picking which one you want to have a good matchup for, it's Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker is one of the best hitters in baseball. And Seiya Suzuki is a threat and he's a good hitter, but he's not Kyle Tucker. And if I'm picking between those two, I want to get Tucker out. And it should be noted that throughout his career, Tucker's been a good hitter against lefties. He's a very good hitter. Just generally, he's a great hitter. But I'd still rather have the platoon matchup with the lefty there. He's worse against lefties than righties, so it's not like we're talking about a reverse platoon guy or something. He's just a good hitter in general, so he can still handle him. But yeah, I would have gone to Zastryzny. I get it in this one. This isn't one I'm gonna harp on too much, but I think the question then becomes like, well, but why was he ready for Tucker if even if a base runner reached, he wasn't going to get used? Like, it almost felt like you either had to say, if Hap gets on, we're going to Zastryzny, and if Hap doesn't get on, we'll let Patrick try and face these next 2, probably, because then they probably do let him face Suzuki. Either way, if there's 2 outs when Tucker comes up, I think that could be a little different. But yeah, I just, that's the confusing part of it for me, is like, okay, if Hap reaches, then I don't really get why Rob Z was completely ready to come in if he wasn't going to be brought in when the guy got on base and you had that matchup coming up. So that's what I would question. But the overall process of not going to him there, I'm not super upset about. I get the logic to a degree. And, Suzuki in the matchup that they were probably still hoping they'd have, he took advantage of a not great spot and hit a homer, and that's baseball. Sometimes I didn't have a huge problem with this one, but it was just a little confusing when you look at like the whole picture there.
That is the bigger takeaway here more than anything, is this is a good Cubs lineup and there's no great way to line up again. Like, remember, this is a Craig Counsell managed team, and Craig Counsell organizes his lineup in a way that makes it very challenging to play the matchup game. And this is what it looks like a little bit when, number one, he's just got good hitters, but number two, the Brewers are also on the other side of the way that he lines things up. So I think you kind of saw a little bit of that in this situation here. Pete Crow Armstrong would add an insurance home run in the 8th off of Rob Z, ironically, later in the game. So the Brewers dropping game 1. Game 2 would be rained out. It's been postponed and moved to August 18th. When the Brewers go back to Wrigley, they'll play a day-night split doubleheader. And that's going to put them in kind of a rough spot, because that's going to end up contributing to a stretch of 19 games in 18 days for the Brewers from August 15th through September 1st. Obviously, they do get the extra arm for the doubleheader. So now this is where I can already predict that we're going to be talking about this. Will Pat Murphy use the extra pitcher that they put on the roster in the doubleheader? Or is he going to use high leverage guys for the second time that day for win tonight? And this one also is like, there's an extra layer to this one, because this is going to be a divisional game in August, where I think you could probably make a little more of an argument for hitting the gas pedal. But I already know it's coming. This is going to be the discussion that we're going to have in about exactly 2 months, because it's, what is this, June 18th that this is coming out, or I can't remember what day it is in the month. June 20th. It's June
20th, I
19th is
believe.
where
Yep.
we're talking right now. I already know this is going to be a topic of discussion when that day comes, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Game 3, again, dramatic finish. Brewers barely hanging on for an 8-7 win over the Cubs. This, again, Cubs offense is good. They would end up battling back in this one.
Yes.
We'll start with the Brewers, though, who were aggressive against Jameson Taillon, scoring 5 runs off of him within the first 3 innings. Rhys Hoskins and Caleb Durbin hit home runs. William Contreras hit an RBI single. So the Brewers are, we talk about like swing decisions. The Brewers always emphasize swing decisions. They don't chase. They have one of the best chase rates in baseball. If you look on Fangraphs, they are the lowest chase rate. They have the lowest chase rate since 2023. The flip side of that is they also have the lowest in-zone swing rate and the highest called strike rate. And so where this gets interesting for me is there's another layer to this too. And like I know we've talked before, you've mentioned it before, like do the Brewers need to swing at more pitches in the strike zone? The other layer to this is that the Brewers don't just think of swing decisions as swing at strikes and take balls. The added layer to this is the way they actually think about it is it's not even really, watch balls and swing at strikes. That's a simplified version. But in actuality, it's swing at pitches you can hit and take the pitches you can't hit. Now, obviously, out of zone pitches are going to be pitches that you can't hit most of the time. But sometimes that also means that before you get to 2 strikes, you're going to take pitches in the strike zone that are like pitchers' pitches or pitches in locations that you can't hit. Like this is when you look at Garrett Mitchell. This is why Garrett Mitchell is more passive than most hitters against pitches in the top third of the strike zone because he knows that he swings and misses 75% of the time when he does swing at those. So if it's before 2 strikes, he's going to take that pitch a lot. Bryce Terang, who I talked about a little bit because Pat Murphy talked to me about him when I wrote about like the Brewers having like the opposite kind of swing path of what Murphy says is the better swing path to have, or the one that gives you a little more advantages when your timing's not perfectly calibrated. He brought up as part of this, like Bryce Terang with his swing path doesn't do well with the high fastball either. It doesn't manifest always in the same way that it does with Mitchell, but he doesn't do well with the high fastball. But Bryce Terang thinks that he can hit the high fastball. So what the Brewers want him to do is stop swinging at the high fastball, take more of those for strikes instead of taking a non-productive swing. And my guess is that on a larger level, that's probably what contributes to the Brewers not chasing, but also not swinging a lot of in-zone pitches. Because I think, let's be honest here, a lot of their hitters are just not great hitters. I think some of them have bigger weaknesses than other hitters do. So if they're being told, hey, the way to maximize your profile is actually just don't swing at these if it's early in the at-bat and then hope you get one in your wheelhouse, and maybe that's how the production ticks up a little bit, I do think that contributes to this. And I actually think this game was a pretty good example. So they were very aggressive against Taillon. The Brewers' in-zone swing rate this year is like 61%, I think. And they swung at almost 70% of the in-zone pitches that Jameson Taillon threw. Jameson Taillon like threw a lot of cookies in this game. It was a lot of pitches that should be in any hitter's wheelhouse. So it's kind of a chicken or egg thing. So the question is, did they go into the game with the plan to be aggressive against Taillon, or did they see Taillon as making these mistakes, and because he's making these mistakes, they were aggressive on the mistakes? Because you look at what they did against Taillon, it worked. But then the Cubs bullpen came in and largely shut the Brewers, like the Cubs B bullpen largely came in and shut the Brewers down the rest of the way. And I looked at this like pitcher by pitcher. As soon as Taillon came out of the game, the Brewers in-zone swing rate like plummeted. It was under 60% for every other pitcher that appeared in this game. So I think it kind of comes back to like, oh, well, now these guys aren't making these mistakes, and now the Brewers are going back to, well, this is not maybe it'll be a strike, but it's not a pitch I think I'm going to be able to hit, so I'm not going to swing at it. And then the production goes down and all that stuff. So I think just an interesting conversation to have when you're talking about being aggressive, swinging more at the right pitches versus not swinging at the wrong pitches, and it's not always as simple as ball or strike. But that was just something that stood out to me as I was kind of watching what the offense was doing in this one.
Yeah, it was definitely noticeable that they were just jumping on stuff early in counts. And I mean, the contact early in the game was loud. Even the outs, a lot of the outs were loud. I mean, it was, you looked at Baseball Savant and just went to exit velocity and just looked at the Brewers. It was a lot of red, just a lot of red across the whole line. But I agree with you. I think most of it was just because these were basically middle pitches, not in zone pitches, but they were middle or close to it. And just, I mean, it's good still. You want the Brewers to jump on those and do damage on them. Like, it's good to see them do that. But I think this was a case more of just Taillon not having it clearly today. It also probably helped that Taillon could not land a curveball where he wanted it at all early in the game. And that's always been a very good pitch for him. Most of the rest of his stuff is pretty hard, which means you've taken, again, like I talk about a lot, like that velocity band kind of out of the equation. Brewers were seeing curveball and they're saying, nope, not swinging, just going to take it. And he couldn't really find a way to force them to have to do anything with it. So it was a good approach. They did a good job with what they had, but I do agree. I think this is more a case of just a kind of a one-off here where Taillon just did not have it and was giving them stuff to hit early in counts. And again, they did their job jumping on it, but I don't know that I still think on the larger scale that like being more aggressive would benefit to an extent this Brewers offense. I think there could be a little bit more aggressiveness on pitches in the zone, even if it's not necessarily your wheelhouse or whatever. But I don't think this was a case where it was like, oh yeah, this happened because they were aggressive. I think they were aggressive because he just didn't have the stuff to get them out today.
Isaac Collins again homering, 3-run shot in the fifth to make it 8-3. We got a question about him in a couple minutes. We'll talk about him some more. The Cubs, however, their offense chipping away. Ian Happ hit a 3-run home run off of Aaron Ashby in the seventh. They added 2 runs off of Abner Uribe in the eighth, who was battling a couple of infield hits, a suddenly much smaller strike zone within the final 3 innings of the game. I was actually impressed in this outing because I think he pitched a lot better. There was also like the first runner to reach as well was Pete Crow Armstrong on a pitch that may or may not have hit him. I couldn't really tell definitively from the replay that they showed on TV. PCA didn't really seem to think it hit him, but it seems like the home plate umpire kind of had his mind made up that it hit him. Home plate umpire not making a lot of friends on the Milwaukee side in this one. But yeah, the strike zone shrunk a little bit as well. Abner had at-bats where he threw multiple pitches that were like right on the black and they weren't called. And then it was the same thing for Trevor McGill in the ninth to the first batter he faced. So leadoff runner reaches on a walk because McGill had him struck out, but 2 pitches that were pretty clearly in the strike zone not being called. He would slam the door, though, and I actually thought this is one of his best outings in quite some time. He looked very sharp.
Yeah, Kyle Tucker even whiffed on the fastball. We've talked about the lack of whiff on the fastball, but it was there a little bit today. And like you said, I mean, the guy he ended up walking was struck out, and then he ends up getting a double play out of Suzuki to end the game, which I saw your tweet a little later on, like, oh, noted ground ball pitcher Trevor McGill, but it worked out perfectly in that spot, obviously, and a nice play. Honestly, we were talking before we started about Durbin's defense a little bit, and that was one of the plays, like when the camera flipped, I was expecting him to be like sliding or maybe having to make like a tough play to his left, and he got there relatively easily. I never saw an angle on where he started or anything, but the ball was hit decently hard, and he made a pretty easy looking play on it. So that was nice to see from him, and an easy turn for Terang, who had plenty of time. But yeah, McGill's stuff just looked crisper today. It got some, like I said, seeing some fastball whiffs was really nice to see, but everything was around the zone, like you mentioned. I mean, the 2 pitches that would have been Happ who led off the inning, and then even landing the curveball that was called ball 3 against Suzuki. pretty much all his misses were right around the zone or even in the zone and called balls. So it looked really good. And honestly, really since the Gorman bunt, it's looked pretty good in terms of the swings he got in the Cardinal series. Like he got the 3 strikeouts in a row then he had a really nice, solid looking inning today. Yeah, it seems like maybe some stuff is starting to come around for him. We will have to see. I still think at some point we might start getting too reliant on the curveball, and that does concern me if the fastball doesn't get the whiffs. But seeing it today gave me a little hope that might be hopefully on the horizon in terms of coming back a little bit.
Let's go to a couple listener questions now. We'll start with Lance, who asked about Isaac Collins. Is there a place for Collins on the roster when Garrett Mitchell and Blake Perkins return? So Isaac Collins now among Brewers with at least 100 plate appearances leads the team in WRC plus at 116, which again is probably more a reflection on the Brewers offense as much as it is on Isaac Collins. When your best hitter is good but not great, but bottom line is he's swung the bat quite well, played great defense in left field, been a switch hitter as well, adding some roster flexibility that way. So Garrett Mitchell and Blake Perkins are both rehabbing in AAA right now. Mitchell is going to be back before Perkins because Perkins basically needs to have an entire spring training because he didn't have one when he was with the team in Arizona several months ago because that fracture happened almost immediately into spring. Mitchell is going to be back sooner. We don't have a date for him yet, but we're getting close, I think. When Garrett Mitchell comes back, Daz Cameron is the corresponding move. He's almost certainly going to get DFA'd. Collins will still be around. When Perkins returns, which is it's a ways out yet, that's when you're going to be asking this question, I think. And I mean, because there's so much time left, I think the question is still, or the answer, excuse me, is we'll see. If Perkins doesn't look good as he's rehabbing and they decide he needs more time beyond what the minimum number of days you can have as a position player on the rehab, because it is a little bit shorter than the 30 days that 30 days that pitchers get. If they decide that, hey, he just needs more time, you can option him, keep him in Nashville and go from there. If he does look ready and he's really knocking on the door for a roster spot, then it kind of comes down to as well, like, well, what's Isaac Collins doing? Now, I like Isaac Collins. I think he's a very capable big league fourth outfielder, but he's not a 116 WRC plus hitter. He's not 16% better than the league average hitter. And for most of the season, he's been hovering around like a touch below league average. And basically he's been hot for a week, which has now pushed that slash line up significantly in what's still a fairly small sample. He could have three rough weeks, and you're right back to where you were before, where it's, yep, Isaac Collins is nice, but does he have to be on the roster if Blake Perkins is healthy? Blake Perkins can play center field. Isaac Collins, probably not. Then you're maybe looking at, yep, Perk comes back, Collins gets optioned out. Like it's still such a small sample for Collins to the point where like the line can still change a lot within a couple weeks, to the point where I don't even know that we need to ask this question right now, because there's stuff that can happen. And for that reason, I really don't have a thought on it right now. I don't even think as good as he's been, I don't think we need to be having the conversation right now if Isaac Collins needs to stay on the roster when everybody's healthy. I mean, you don't know what his numbers are going to look like at that point, especially if that is like still 4 weeks out potentially for Perkins.
Yeah, I think the other part you can factor in here is if Mitchell looks as lost offensively as he did to start the year, by the time Perkins is back, that there's the option to option Mitchell as well. I mean, I think that's the least likely outcome of all of them, but I think it would be on the table if Mitchell's still not really hitting and Collins does continue to put up solid offense and good defense in left. I mean, at that point, maybe you do consider sending Mitchell down and working on some things in AAA with him and trying to figure out some of the offensive stuff while you have the time to and the ability to. But I don't really expect that to be the case. And like you said, I don't think we need to make a decision on this. The Brewers don't need to make a decision on this anytime super soon. My guess would be timeline wise, we're looking at more around the All-Star break, probably a little before, because Perkins would run out of the 20 days that he gets before that. But maybe 4th of July, couple weeks still, 2.5 weeks or so. And that's, again, enough time for a guy who's right now, Collins is on pace for around 400 plate appearances, which is, it's a solid number. That would be a pretty reasonably high number for a guy who's actually a fourth outfielder on the team, not playing regularly like he has kind of been forced to do for a while. And I'm a big Isaac Collins fan. I mean, we talked about it before the year. He was my dark horse to make the roster. Like, I like Isaac Collins. I think he's a capable hitter at the big league level, and I did not expect him to be this good of a defender in left field. He has been an incredibly good defensive left fielder. But again, I think he's a capable major league hitter. I don't think he's, again, like Jack said, 116 WRC plus type. It'd be awesome if he is. And if he does continue to do this to the point when everybody is ready, I think then you would have a really hard time making a case to send him down in lieu of both of those two, who are, both very solid players, do a lot of things, especially defensively, and they do it in center field instead of left. But if he's still hitting and playing great defense, then yeah, it's going to be a hard decision to make. But we don't know if that's going to be the case yet. And we have time to let that kind of sort itself out. And there's also the opportunity. There's also the chance that a different injury pops up, or even Mitchell or Perkins have a setback during this. Like, we don't have to make this decision yet. So there's a lot of things that can happen in the time before they do have to. Like Jack pointed out, Daz Cameron will be DFA'd when Mitchell returns, and then it's really just the Perkins timeline that you have to worry about. And as a Collins fan, I'm glad that everybody's very excited about him right now. And it is a very cool story. Like, a minor league Rule 5 pick a couple years ago, a guy who wasn't even protected on the AAA roster of the Rockies. It was the Rockies organization that let Isaac Collins go, a team that is barely cracking double-digit wins at this point in the season. So, like, it's a very, very cool story. But right now, I don't think we need to make it more than it is. He's not some lock to be his pace right now, I believe, is pretty close to like 4 WAR. And I don't expect him to be a 4 WAR type of player. If he continues to somehow show that over the next month or so, then yeah, I think you're going to have a really hard time making a case to send him down. But we need to see if that happens first.
Ron asks if standing pat at the deadline would be the worst option for the Brewers. Lots of pieces to sell, or could become a far better team by patching up a couple of spots. Feels like doing nothing would be a crime. So to me, standing pat is only the worst option if there are like some seriously solid long-term assets to be acquired by trading some of the pieces to sell. I mean, when you talk about pieces to sell, it's basically Hoskins and maybe Freddie. Like, I don't know that there are actually that many pieces to sell. Could you try to sell high on Jake Bauers? Yes, but I don't think anybody's really going to be buying into Jake Bauers being, a well above average hitter sustainably. I don't think that you're going to get a lot for him. And again, he's a first base, can hack it in corner outfield type. Same for Hoskins too. Like, he's at a 112 WRC plus. I do think he gets closer to that 120 again, because he's been in a cold stretch and he'll snap out of it. He hit the home run at Wrigley. Hopefully that's a start of him coming out of it a little bit. But like a 120 WRC plus rental bat at first base, again, you're not getting a ton back for him. Yeah, I don't have a strong feeling about it yet. It depends on where the market's at for those guys. I think the worst option is you go for it and it doesn't work and you've given up some assets who would have helped you long term. That's what the worst outcome is here. So I think there is a world where they do just kind of stand pat, and it might confuse some people. Like, why wouldn't you do something here? Why wouldn't you see what's out there for this guy? Trades are tricky because you don't know what the market looks like from our perspective. You just don't. And I mean, that's what's going to be the driving factor. What does the market look like? What are the prices? What can you get for this guy? What does this guy cost? Like we don't know that. We just don't. And I think I've gone on the rant before. That's just why out of all the things that we try to analyze, like trade season is by far my least favorite because I think there's just so much that we don't know for sure that you kind of have to know to
Yeah.
make some good predictions or have some good analysis about this stuff. So no, I don't think it's the worst option though. Because I speculatively speaking, I would be a little bit surprised if like outside of trading Freddie right now at the deadline with a year and a half left on his deal, I don't think there's really a lot they could do that would really swing the needle a whole lot one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree. I think the one true asset that would be at all under consideration to be traded is Freddie. I don't think there's anyone else who would even really get much of a thought. Maybe there's I mean, I don't know what the comp would be, but like when they traded Drew Rasmussen and the Willie Adames deal, maybe there's a deal out there where it benefits both teams with two younger type players who kind of swap teams. I don't know what that would be. And like Jack said, I'm not as quite quite as bad as Jack in terms of like not enjoying trade season, but I do find it to be mostly an exercise in futility to try and figure out like, okay, what are we going to get? What can we get for blank? Like I don't know. I don't know what the market is for these guys. And I think honestly, like we were right on where Corbin Burns and where Devin Williams were going to get traded in terms of what teams, but the packages that I was expecting were totally different, or not expecting, but kind of looking at or thinking about, like, were totally different. So even if you kind of know who might be interested or what fits there are, it's still really hard. I mean, there are 150 players in a major league organization to try and figure it out. It's not like NBA trade season where you have to match salaries and you have to figure out, like, there's not many options. You know exactly who's available and who you could make work with the trade. Like, it's just not how baseball works. So I'm with Jack to a degree where it's like, yeah, some of the talks around deadline time just feel like going in circles because we just don't know. And it doesn't mean there's not value or at least fun in thinking about it to a degree, but like it mostly ends up just being kind of pointless energy, I think, or wasted energy. But just to answer, I guess, the full question quickly, like I don't expect them to buy heavily. I think that's the one that I 100% don't see them doing. Doesn't mean, again, I couldn't see like a Moncada type trade or even like the highest end if the Diamondbacks sold maybe Suarez. But again, I think that market's going to be pretty expensive. But I don't really expect them to go all in, and I'm pretty confident they won't. Selling, I guess I can see it if they start falling out of it, obviously, and I can kind of see maybe a scenario where you go not with Freddie Peralta, but with some of the other veterans, like the poor man's Josh Hader type trade, where you again trade a vet and you get something that maybe helps a little this year, but also maybe helps you a little next year in return. Like I could see a scenario where they end up feeling like they can make that happen. But I think to me, that's almost more standing pat than buying or selling. It's more just the way you're swapping around the assets to make it happen. You're kind of standing pat, but you're maybe getting younger in the process or something. Like I think that's maybe the one way I could see it happening where it's not just one or the other. But I don't think there's going to be a super exciting deadline for the Brewers in either direction, I guess I should say.
Honestly, if I had to predict kind of like maybe kind of that like asset for asset move you're talking about, like that might catch some people by surprise. I wonder if like the Brewers would consider trading like Hall or Ashby at the deadline for like a position player who's got
Yeah.
multiple years of control. That's one that I could see. especially because neither one of
to a
those
team who
guys have
thinks they can
really
start.
turned into what they thought they were going to be.
Yeah, I could see that.
Not saying it will happen, but like that, I would not be shocked if like one of those guys is in some kind of move where it brings somebody back who's got some control, but maybe they think that those guys, like that guy, fills a more needed role on the team a little bit better than maybe what either one of those guys could do. Like, especially if the Brewers are starting to doubt, can DL Hall actually start? Can Aaron Ashby actually start?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and with Ashby too, like you're getting out of, you could maybe get out of some money there depending on how the financials work out. Not that he's making a lot, but does have that extension that he's on. I don't know, but that's just kind of one that popped into my head. As far as like going all in, Alex asked about that. He said, will there be a year in which the Brewers go all in for a stretch? This goes against what Mark has stated with his goal of having a consistent competitive team. But I fear we will be having the same conversation in 2030 as we are today, hanging our hats on the future to come. I think it would have to be, depends on how you're defining all in. Because, okay, so what I was going to say was it's the right combination of who are your competitors in the division and for a World Series? What is the current team doing? What does the current team need? And then how deep is the farm right now or
Yep.
at that point? But you could also make the case that if they're comfortable making bigger moves because the farm is so deep, then is that actually all in when they have even more resources they could trade, but they're not? Like, you see what I'm getting at here? But in terms of doing more than what they usually have, I think that's what it would take. You would have to be like so deep in the farm that you're
Yeah.
comfortable with parting with guys and you still feel really good. I don't think they've quite been in that spot. They've just had too many guys, I think, that internally they really, really like who would have to be in that package for a trade. And they feel like either because they like that guy so much or because you part with that guy and then there's not enough guys that you like that much. Like, I think that's where they're at. I mean, really what it comes down to is they just don't like being in a spot where they feel like they've got absolutely nothing in case what's happening right now at the big league level falls apart. And
Yeah.
I think it's possible they could get to a point where they feel like they have enough behind them, especially with, I think, like some of the strides they're taking in the right direction in player development at the lower levels. But I honestly can't say when that's going to be. I think there's a lot of things you just need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I think when I look at it, when I look at the future, like payroll and projected payroll and everything else, it depends to me if you decide to pay any of the Terang, Freelick, Mitchell, those types. But if you don't and you decide to move on from them for other young players, I think when you get to the end of the 2020s, there could be an influx of a lot of guys who are coming up and being on rookie deals, pre-arb guys who are making the minimum. Yelich's deal coming off the books around that time. You won't have, I mean, Freddie's not expensive, but you won't have that type of deal. Ashby would be either up or close to it if he's not traded, like you kind of just mentioned. There's the possibility that they actually could have a low payroll with a very talented team. Contreras' money would likely be off the books at the end of the 2020s. Like if Made, Pena, all the guys I talk about every week are actually hitting and they're actually legitimate prospects, and Miz is a starting prospect, and Henderson and all these guys who are still either just entering ARB or are pre-ARB, then maybe you can see a case where they go out and even if it's not a signing, or maybe it's another Lorenzo Cain type signing where it's a good player, but it's not an insane deal where you're hampering yourself forever. Or they do have the farm system depth to make a Yelich type trade. And it might be for someone who's a little more expensive this time around, but still locked up for a while or something like that. Like I could see it maybe happening there where you're making quote unquote all in moves. But I think that's really where I start to see it as a possibility. And again, that takes a lot of different things happening. It takes a lot of decisions to not extend current Brewers that they have right now, where they would take up some of that money that you're potentially looking at being open. Like it's hard to say, like Jack said, an actual timeline, but I guess when I look out into the future, that's where all these low A guys right now and high A guys are starting to not just enter Major League Baseball, but also maybe be in year 2, and you can see that, oh, we actually have stuff here. Like we have a legitimate core, and we can tell that they're big league players, and like Curios are one expensive deal that we have at that point, and he's not crazy expensive on his own at any point in this contract. I think that's where, if it happens, that's where I could maybe see it happening. But I think generally you're going to see the same type of process where they try and maximize each year without completely pushing aside the future at the same time. And I think, as frustrating as that is, I 100% understand why they do it that way.
I think even then, when you get to that point, like, it's always safer to assume that not that many of those prospects are all going to hit.
Yes.
And I think like that's what it comes back to, is the Brewers never want to be in a spot where they're reliant on like this group of 10 prospects they all need to hit for us to be in a good spot. And I think that's what they're trying to avoid. So yeah, like I don't think you're wrong. Like that, I think that probably is a timeline where it could happen. But I mean, even right now, we're seeing it with Churio. Like, I'm sure there are some people who thought Churio was going to be an absolute superstar already by now. He's not, at least not yet.
Yeah.
And like that might happen with Jesus Mate. It might happen with Payne. It might happen with several of these guys, and some of them probably aren't going to figure it out at all at the big leagues. That's just how this works. So like that's why the Brewers, I think, like to hang on to as many of these guys as possible. Now you could flip that argument on its head and say that's why you trade some of them, because they're not all going to hit. But I think that from the Brewers' vantage point, they're just like, well, why don't we just keep all of them, and then enough of them work out where we're just consistently competitive and we can find ways to kind of build around the edges off of that without breaking the bank. But yeah, I don't think that there's like a major change to the way they do things really on the horizon. So I'll just talk about prospects. We have the sandbox coming up, so we'll get to that in like 2 minutes. We'll just really quickly rattle through some injury updates. We'll start with Brandon Woodruff, who has seen his rehab paused after he was hitting the right elbow by a line drive in what was potentially his final rehab start. So Spencer, I know we talked at the moment about how that could very well be a blessing in disguise for him, because we weren't super thrilled with where the stuff appeared to be at. And he said on Sunday, after throwing a 25-pitch bullpen, that it was a blessing in disguise, because he feels like it gave him the opportunity to sort through a couple things mechanically, physically, just get a little bit of a breather. He said in that 25-pitch bullpen that metrically the stuff was where he wanted it to be. So he feels like things are cleaned up a little bit. He's in a better spot now. And then he threw another bullpen, 40-pitch bullpen on Thursday. He had said on Sunday over the last weekend that he was hoping 2 rehab starts. So the first one, go out there, get up to like that 60-pitch range already if he's already throwing 40 in the bullpen. And then that second start, get into that 80 range. And then after that, potentially back to the big leagues. Again, the real test is going to be now, once he restarts a rehab assignment, is the stuff actually going to look better? The line that the Brewers seem to be running with now is, well, it doesn't really matter what he's doing in AAA. Once he gets into a big league game, like with the intensity, it's all going to come back. I'm not going to full on dispute that, but I just, whenever this becomes a conversation, I always come back to, like, if it was in there and like attainable right now, like you feel like you would see it come out sometimes.
Yes.
Like he went from hitting 95 in most of his rehab outings to not getting beyond 92. Like, to me, that's not just, intensity, tired of being in the rehab setting kind of thing. Like, it's not there right now. So we'll see if it's there when he does go back out on a rehab assignment.
Yeah. We've talked about it so many times at this point. I mean, that's what we need to see. It's good to hear that he feels like some things got cleaned up, and it's nice to especially hear that it did feel like a blessing in disguise, because that was my main concern at the time, was that how would he be able to kind of handle it and look at it as it kind of progressed? Like, was this just more dumb bad luck, or did he kind of recognize like, hey, things maybe weren't where they should be. Now I have the opportunity to clean them up before I come back. And it sounds like that is what happened. So, yeah, I mean, when he does make that first rehab start, it's going to be locked in on the metrics and the velo and just see where he's at, because if it's there like it was at the beginning of the rehab, we agreed and we talked about it a lot, like that the stuff we saw early could get outs at the big league level. The stuff we saw late couldn't. So we need to see the stuff that he was showing early on. And if it's back, then I think once he does get up to the 80 pitches, if he shows it throughout an 80 pitch outing, then I won't have a problem with him coming back. And I guess if that is the timeline where he talks about only 2 rehab starts, maybe that's Quintana's timeline, like we talked about earlier, because that is maybe when they'd have to make the next true rotation decision. But again, that's still mostly in line with what we talked about, probably around middle of July. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I really want to see how it looks and see if he actually did clean some stuff up, and also see if, maybe that the ankle was bothering him a little bit at the end of it, and now he's had time for that to rest too. Like there's a lot of things that maybe he may have actually benefited from. So I'm glad to hear that he's kind of seeing that at this point.
Nestor Cortez threw a bullpen with 2 up downs earlier this week. Reportedly felt good. Next on the docket for him is a live BP, and then looking at a rehab assignment after that. As far as a return, still looking at sometime after the All-Star break, because he is going to have to stretch back out a little bit. And then finally, Garrett Mitchell and Blake Perkins, who we talked at length about, they had their rehab assignments transferred to Nashville. We'll see how much time each of them spend down there. With that, we can go to Spencer's favorite portion of the show to close things out. It looks like your notes aren't quite as extensive as they have been some weeks, or maybe that's just because you didn't put any graphics in here on the agenda this time. But I'll let you jump into it for the minor league sandbox.
All right. We got a few questions this week, so we'll start with those. First, Bill asked thoughts on Eduardo Garcia. So I talked about Garcia, I think it was last week, as a guy who's kind of resurrected his prospect status. He's only 22 years old, in high A, so not super old for the level by any means. For a prospect a little older than you would normally be, but it's also similar to like a guy who just got drafted out of college and is in high A for his first season. So he's been in the organization for quite a while. He's playing center field and shortstop, and he's doing a very good job defensively at both of them. He was a shortstop only for most of his career, and now he started to add some positional versatility to his game. He's played some third base at times, mostly short and center this year, though. He's still interesting. Like he's walking more than ever. He's striking out less than ever. The power is there, but if he's not a minor league free agent at the end of this year, he's definitely Rule 5 eligible, but I think he might be a minor league free agent, which makes it tough to know if he will actually be sticking around in the organization longer term. But I think he's back to being a relevant prospect, which is impressive because he had really fallen off in terms of just prospect stats. Everything he had, he was not hitting. The defense was always there, but he struck out a ton. He didn't walk at all. There was a little pop, but not as much as he's showing this year. It seems like he may have figured things out. I just wonder if it'll be too late for it to really help the Brewers organization, but still really good news for him. Hopefully he can, whether it's with the Brewers or not, have a successful career and eventually make it to the big leagues, which he has the talent to do. Speaking of some middle infielders and some people we talked about just a few minutes ago, Mitch Ryan asked us, or stated that he started to see Pena over Mate popping up in some places, rankings wise. Some people have had Pena over Jesus Mate on their rankings. He said, or asked, he's curious if Spencer has moved on that at all. So I still have Mate over Pena. My rankings for the top 3 are Mate, Misiorowski, Pena right now. I get it. I don't blame people for going that direction. Frankly, offensively, like Pena's been better this year, so I get it to an extent. The weird thing is that I think Mate's actually looked a lot better at short than Pena, and that was not what I had heard or even what I saw a little bit in like spring. It sounded more like and looked more like Pena was going to be the shortstop of the two, but Mate's looked quite good there recently. He really has stepped it up as the season's progressed. For me, it's still Mate over Pena. He's still driving the ball to the opposite field with a lot of power. I think at some point you are going to want to see him start to pull the ball more, and I think that's where you start to see the homer show up more for Mate. Pena's been able to do that this year. He has tapped into pull side power, and that's where he's hitting his home runs. But they're both very talented. I mean, Just Baseball has Mate in the top 6 or 7. They have Pena 12th. Baseball America has them both in the top 35-ish now. Mate in the top 10. Like these, we're talking about two guys who could be top 10 prospects in baseball, both of them. So I think we're just splitting hairs more than anything. More than anything else, it's just very exciting to have both of these guys in the organization at the same time. Both 18 years old, both performing well above average at their level. It's fun times. I mean, they both have 30 steals now as well, or maybe Pena's at 29, but like there's so much for both of them. And I still go Mate over Pena in part because of the defense. I would lean Mate right now. But again, I think it's kind of splitting hairs, and I think that's just a good thing for the organization and for both of them. Caden Schaefer asked, what do you think the reasoning is for keeping Wilkin and Adams in AA, given neither will be high batting average players anyways? Our shortstop, third base black holes at the major league level are seriously holding the team back. So Wilkin, to me, I would separate the two. Like, I'll note Adams and Wilkin are the Southern League leaders in OPS and weighted runs created plus by a lot. There are only 4 players in the Southern League who have an 800 OPS or higher. Sal Stewart and Cooper Kinney, they're 815 and 803 respectively. Brock Wilkin and Luke Adams are 942 and 910. So there is about 100-point difference between anyone else in the Southern League and those two. WRC plus, Wilkins 177, Adams is 174, Sal Stewart is 138, Kinney's 137. So again, almost a 40-point difference between those, which is a huge difference in weighted runs created plus. They've separated themselves, but I would say Wilkin has separated himself even from Adams, if only because, one, he's more experienced, he's been there longer, this is his second full season there, but also he's been playing third base, and I think that leans into why Wilkin hasn't gotten called up. I think Anthony Siegler, they want Siegler to play a lot of third base. He's been mostly playing third base lately. Again, in likely preparation for a potential call up to the big leagues. That makes it difficult to move Wilkin up, where they also have they just traded Wes Clark for cash because they have Andrew Vaughn, Ernesto Martinez, Bobby Dahlbeck, and Tyler Black all playing some first base. So first base isn't really an option. One of those guys I just mentioned is usually going to be at DH. Until Siegler goes up, I think it's hard for Wilkin to get moved up to AAA. But I don't think we're super far away from Siegler getting the call to the big leagues at some point. And again, I think Wilkin basically follows his path. When he goes to the big leagues, Wilkin goes to AAA. At that point, my guess would be Adams actually starts playing a lot more third, which he hasn't played much this year. And they want to see how he figures things out defensively over there. I still think he's capable of it. I think they want to at least keep it on the table as an option. He's been very good at first base defensively, but third base, he had things he needed to clean up. He liked to throw on the run. And while he has a good arm, he wasn't great at always using his body when he would throw on the run. So there were things he needed to clean up with the hands and the footwork and everything else, but I think he's capable of it with his athleticism and just the arm strength in general. I think he can do it. So I think they want to get him more reps there. So again, Siegler to MLB, Wilkin to AAA, and then Adams to a lot more playing time at third base while Mike Bovee plays first, and maybe Blake Burke gets called up. Who knows? But like, I think that's kind of the way they would do it, and that's how I would probably look at it as well. So hopefully that answers the question. I think I wouldn't rule out a chance of Wilkin making it this year, but if it happens in the big leagues, I think we're probably still looking at like a September call up, or again, maybe they sell at the deadline and that changes the whole just makeup of the roster moving forward. But I think barring that happening, it's probably September at the very earliest, and I'd still kind of expect 2026 debut for Wilkin. that can lead us into some of our hitters. And Wilkin and Adams, I'll just talk about them quick since we already just talked about him. Wilkin is just crushing the ball in June. Again, he finished May not super strong, but in June, he has an 1195 OPS, a 241 WRC plus. He's hit 6 homers. His walk rate is 15.2%, and his strikeout rate is down to 24.2%. So that's been really nice to see. He's walking at a reasonably sustainable rate instead of like the 26% we saw in April. And then the strikeout rate has gone down, especially this month. So that's really nice to see. Luke Adams, similarly, 1156 OPS in June, 237 WRC plus with 5 homers. So both of them have mashed. Again, I just laid out what I think they probably do or what I would do. So I think Wilkins the one you see promoted if either of them in the next week or two or so. Moving to some complex league hitters, Hondo Fry, Encarnacion, I've talked about a couple times. He has a 916 OPS on the season. He's been missing a lot of time lately. I think he's dealing with some sort of injury. We don't really know what it is, but he's only played in 5 games this month. But in his most recent game, he hit a ball 113.1 miles per hour, which would have been the 3rd hardest hit ball on the Brewers this year. So a nice poke, and it was a double, I should note. And then he is also running a 15.5% strikeout rate, despite being able to hit the ball with that much authority. So his swing is, there's a lot of effort in it. So I expect there to be more swing and miss as he moves up the ladder, but it's impressive to only be striking out 15% of the time while also doing a lot of damage and hitting the ball as hard as he is. So he's a name that I really, really think people need to keep an eye on moving forward. Maybe the biggest surprise and pleasant surprise in the ACL this year has been Jaden Fielder, Prince Fielder's son, coming into tonight, 910 OPS, 144 WRC plus. He's striking out almost 26% of the time, which when that's happening in the ACL, that's always a little concerning. But there's very real power. He's got real power. He's not a big time prospect, but he's more than just Prince Fielder's son getting an opportunity in the organization. There's something there with the bat. He has pop. He has the ability to hit it in the gap, and he takes a bunch of walks. I think he's got a pretty good eye in terms of plate discipline, but the swing and miss is going to have to get cut down. If he does that, he's a pretty decent athlete too. He's played some second. He's played some outfield. Then I think you're looking at a guy who's worthy of, at least some consideration for actual prospect status, which is just really cool for a guy who obviously grew up around the Brewers, grew up around baseball. It's cool to see it off to such a solid start in pro ball when I honestly was not really expecting that to happen. Moving to a couple of Timber Rattlers, last 2 on the hitting side of things. Marco Dingus, have to talk about him again because the guy just keeps hitting. 1176 OPS this past week before tonight. He had a homer and 2 doubles, and then he had another homer tonight to the opposite field. Prior to Thursday's games, he had a 149 WRC plus in high A. And the walks have kind of creeped back up. They were pretty low to start off in high A, but almost to a 10% clip now. He's still not striking out much, still in the teens for strikeouts, and he's still not whiffing a lot. He's in my top 10 now for prospect ranks. I mean, that's how far he's climbing. The defense keeps looking good. It's just been incredibly impressive, and I really think the Brewers got themselves one here. I'm all in on Marco Dingus. Yadier Arianamo has a 1011 OPS in June, a 171 WRC plus. He has 2 homers, 6 doubles. He's up to a 128 WRC plus on the season. The guy plays really good defense wherever he's playing. I think the arm is probably best suited for second base, but he's an interesting guy. The swing, if people haven't seen the swing, you got to go find video of the swing. There are a lot of moving parts in the load, but he doesn't strike out much. He doesn't whiff much. It's worked at these levels. Hopefully he gets a chance in Double A at some point soon. But again, there's just a roster crunch at the Double A and Triple A level right now that makes it kind of hard for infielders to move up. But at some point, this is his second year in high A. He's performing really well for the second year in a row. Like, they got to find a way to give him an opportunity at Double A, and I think they will at some point this season. Moving to the pitching side of things, got a DSL guy that I want to talk about. I haven't mentioned before. I don't know if I'm guessing it's Yohan Pena, Joan. Yoan Pena. He's a lefty. He, in his most recent DSL start, he threw 4 shutout innings, 3 hits, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. I had found some video of him. He'll be 17 all season. He's been up to 91, sitting in like that 87 to 90 range from the left side. It's a big, pretty sharp looking. I think it's probably pretty high spin if I had to guess. Mid 70s curveball and a pretty decent looking changeup on video that I didn't catch any velocity on, but I saw a couple clips of, and it had some nice fade to it from the left side. But the fact that he's striking out quite a few hitters as a 17-year-old, as a lefty in DSL, always noteworthy. One I'll definitely be keeping an eye on the rest of the DSL season. In the Complex League, in the Arizona Complex League, Hayden Robinson, I talked about last week, made his first start. He made his second start this time. This time there was StatCast, sort of. It didn't work very well, and it basically only gave us velo. Some people were able to kind of get into the back channels of StatCast and find some data on the way his pitches were moving. I think the main thing to take away here is that he touched 94.6 on the velocity in his inning. He sat 92.8 or averaged 92.8. And he had reportedly been topping out around 91, 92 prior to his surgery that he had last year. The changeup, the slider, the curveball, all very interesting pitches. We didn't get any spin rates on this stuff. We were only able to find some of the actual like movement, but they're separated. The changeup's a really good pitch. I'm guessing it's a high spin one. I think it's more like the Henderson and the Yoho type changeup than like a spin killing changeup, but it looks like a pretty good one. The fastball has a around a negative 4.6 vertical approach angle with decent carry. We didn't get any release height because a lot of this stuff wasn't there. So again, I don't want to take too much from this, but it got a bunch of whiff in that inning. The fastball did. He got a bunch of whiffs in general that inning. So he's one that I'm really excited to follow because if that velo's actually jumped, he's still a very young dude drafted out of high school 2 years ago who was already getting great results last year. I wonder if once he builds up, he'll be in Carolina. The other pitcher in that game for the Brewers on some StatCast data was Griffin Tobias, 2024 draft pick. He had a fine outing. He's had a bit of a slow start. He's similar. He topped out at 94. He kind of sat in that 91, 92 range on his fastballs. He throws four-seam sinker and cutter, although the sinker shape's pretty good. It gets a lot of run, but it's similar in terms of vertical break. So it's more probably of a two-seam type of fastball. Changeup, again, hard to tell for sure without spin rates, but the shape of it doesn't look great, especially compared to Robinson's. Slider looks like a pretty decent pitch, although it also kind of seems like it maybe blends with the cutter. And also, I don't really know how much to trust all of these pitch tagging things on here. It's hard to tell. It's not the greatest. Again, it was kind of figured out through some back channels, and it's missing some of the data that you normally have because it just wasn't working very well that night. So those are the two that threw on that. The final three pitchers we'll talk about, all guys who have recently been promoted. Jaden Dubanowitz, I've learned that is how you pronounce his last name, not Dubanevich, although I kind of like the second one more. But he made a second low A start. He went 6 shutout in this start, 1 hit, 1 walk. He struck out 3. He looks, I don't know how to describe it. I don't think he has the look of like a guy who ever is a big time prospect, but he has the look of a guy who like starts games for almost a decade and people just kind of don't recognize how solid of a career he has. Like that's what he kind of gives me the vibes of. He gets outs, he gets soft contact. He doesn't get a ton of whiff, but I think he's capable of it with some of his pitches. He has 4 pitches that all are just kind of solid. Nothing stands out, but he gets the job done. And I mean, he's a teenager. He's making his second low A start and he goes 6 shutout with only 1 walk and 1 hit. I mean, that's an impressive outing. Another guy who made his first start at a new level, Tyson Harden, made his first Double-A start after being promoted there this week. Well deserved, as we have noted many times on during this segment of the podcast. in his first start, he also went 6 innings. He did allow 2 earned runs on 4 hits and a walk. He struck out 5. His final high A stats after it was all tallied: 57 and 2/3 innings, 62 strikeouts to 9 walks, a 2.34 ERA, and a 1.89 FIP. This stuff still looked really good in his first AA start. He won't get away with mistakes as much, and that's kind of what happened. He did give up a solo homer. He gave up a little bit more hard contact than you had seen in high A, but he still looked the part. He looked like a guy who deserves to be in AA, and for a 12th round pick last year as a college reliever, that's pretty impressive. And again, the velo's holding in starts. It's been quite the find from the Brewers in last year's draft. Another pick from last year's draft, Jaron DeBerry, I always say it, but one of my favorite fits for the Brewers in the draft. Only ended up signing for $25,000 as a 3rd round pick, saved a bunch of money for him. But I think there's a lot here. I wrote about him in my most recent weekly observations article that was on Brewer Fanatic. His last 3 high A starts, he's gone 16 innings, 3.38 ERA, and he's got a 17-3 strikeout to walk ratio. More than anything, it's been nice to see him go 1. He's gone 5 innings plus in all 3 outings. It's been 5 1/3, 5 2/3, and 5 flat. The walks have been limited. Like I said, he's getting strikeouts. He's getting whiffs at a decent clip. I talked about it in the article, but I do think they could probably use his repertoire better. My question, or what I wonder about, is whether they are trying to go fastball heavy just in part to help him develop them, because they are a little generic shape and they're his worst pitches. But I think at the lower levels, you still might want him to use them a decent amount, because you kind of need him to be able to use them when he gets to the big leagues, especially if he is in a starting role, or if he gets to the big leagues, I should say. At the same time, the Brewers just love fastballs, so I don't know. I don't know if they are just going to keep having him throw fastballs, and maybe they won't take advantage of his high spin sweeper and curveball, both of them breaking 3,000 RPMs at a decent clip. Both are good pitches. The changeup was a work in progress coming out of college, but I think it's looked pretty good this year. So I think the secondaries are all there. He throws all 3 forms of the fastball. The cutter is the best one right now. That's more in like that 87, 88 range. And then the fastball is in the 90 to 92 range, touching a little higher. He's very skinny. I still think there's projection there where he might add some velo. I'm a big Jaron DeBerry fan. Again, similar to Dubanowitz, I'm not sure he's like a top of the rotation or even a middle of the rotation guy, but I can see a major league starter there. There are even some Coleman Crow similarities here if he can improve some of the fastball shape stuff like Crow has throughout his career. So that will do it for this edition of the Sandbox. And Jack, if you want to wrap us up.
Thanks for listening. Goodbye.